I would dare to say that for many of us, understanding religion might be something quite difficult, not because of the contents, but because there are so many things or statements that contradict either our experience or our capacity to reason. By this, I don't mean that religion doesn't make sense or that it is not truth. What I mean is that it's a real challenge to trying to understand and comprehend in a coherent manner the different statements that different traditions have posited all along history. And on the other hand, even within each tradition, within each religious tradition, one may find so many things that might seem contradictory that it's a real spiritual and intellectual challenge. I have heard so many sheikhs, masters, gurus from different traditions explaining that sometimes what appears to be contradictory is in reality the result of our own incapacity to deeply get or grasp the inner meaning that's hidden behind the exoteric or apparent teachings. And probably they're right, probably it is something true about that. But even though that, I think that if any tradition is depicting reality, even more, if any tradition is offering to us a path to liberation, it shouldn't contradict reason. And among different proposals, for instance, within Hinduism or Islam, Judaism, Christianism, or any religious tradition, there should be differences in the approaches. I would dare to say some difference that might be just nuances, but not really difference that one may wonder, how is it possible that the prophet from one tradition or another, how is it possible that a great yogi, a great master, a great sheikh from different traditions posit such a different perspective or such a different metaphysical or epistemological or ontological tenets about what reality is, what our role in reality is, and what's the relationship between what we understand as God and ourselves. For me, that's a real challenge. How to make sense of all this, especially if one considers that we are speaking about really wise men and women. We are speaking about sages. We are speaking about people who have shared with us their knowledge and their love towards humanity. So probably it is us who are not really being able to make sense of that, but we should try to delve into the conceptual structure of these different traditions in order to understand not only the core meaning, but also why they differ so much among themselves. In Veils of Unity, our approach to spirituality involves both intellectual inquiry and direct perception. So we trust in your capacity to discern and in your ability to listen to the truth within your heart. This leads us to a distinction that might be very useful, which is the distinction between the external and the internal whenever we are dealing with the hermeneutics or the exegesis of sacred texts. By the external or exoteric, we mean the formal aspects, that which is related with dogma, tradition, rites, how things should be done, what we should do and what we should not do. So it's related with the form, which is very important if we want to direct, if we are trying to give like a direction to the flow of the spiritual energy. So the exoteric aspect is some sort of protection, we may say, for the internal, the esoteric. The word esoteric has been, I would say there is some sort of misconception about what this word really means. It means nothing else than internal. Esoteric means internal as opposed to what is manifest. And the internal aspect in any religious tradition is what we would call the mystic path, the spiritual, the inner path within that specific religious tradition. And it is related with the direct experience of God, the direct experience of truth, in any way that we may understand it. The esoteric or internal aspect of spirituality, the inner path, is something related to our own commitment towards truth. So it involves a personal engagement in a spiritual discipline, and not only following some commandments or following some directions about how we should behave or not. I would say that even there is a distinction between the exoteric, external, and the esoteric, internal dimensions of religion and spirituality, which is related with the fact that from an exoteric point of view, normally people are trying to follow the commandments of their own tradition in such a way to avoid hell and be able to achieve heaven in any way that they might depict both realms. On the contrary, in the spiritual path, in the esoteric dimension, people are not trying to get what's good and avoid what's bad, or they're not even trying to avoid suffering. From an esoteric point of view, what they do is that they're trying to embrace the whole of existence from a perspective or from an attitude which involves dissolving their own egos in this totality that might be called Allah, God, Brahman, in any way that involves something that not only transcends us, but is immanent to our own existence. So we can see that the exoteric and the esoteric dimensions involve quite a different existential attitude. In the first one, we are trying to do the best in order to achieve some sort of spiritual reward. In the other one, in the internal, the esoteric one, people are trying just to dissolve themselves in order to become truth. And this is quite interesting because here we may also differentiate according to whether it is a theistic tradition in which what the person is aiming at is union or reunion with God, or a non-theistic tradition, like for instance one may see in Zen Buddhism, where people are just trying to become what they were in the origin, just this shunyata, this emptiness which involves and connects and gives rise to any form of manifestation. So we may see that there are not only some metaphysical and epistemological differences between the exoteric and the esoteric, but also some soteriological ones. Because soteriology, as you might remember, is the way in which each tradition proposes how we may come back to our origin, our spiritual origin. God, oneness, unity, however we would like to conceptualize it. So soteriology also differs between these kind of approaches. In the first case, in exoterism, soteriology involves or invites us to follow some commandments in a very structured manner, both in our everyday lives and in our spiritual rites. Liturgy, prayers, and everything is very well structured, organized, and we are called to follow these disciplines and procedures in order to behave as God expects from us according to their teachings. In the esoteric dimension, the path to liberation, soteriology, is involved much more with a self-inquiry, with an inner exploration of who we are and with confronting with ourselves. And to a certain extent, one may say that it involves a much great level of commitment and engagement, because there is no distinction between our everyday activities, our conscious of ourselves, and the spiritual path. So then comes the question, why should we need religion if the real path, or let's say the real aim, can only be achieved through the spiritual path, that is, through esotericism? According to some great scholars, there is one very good reason why religion should exist. And it is mainly connected to the fact that religion is a sort of protection because form is necessary. One may even say that form is like the guardian of the inner sense of spirituality. If we don't have some sort of path, some sort of map that guides us or that may lead us in the way in which we should deal with ourselves, with the rest of humanity, with the rest of sentient beings, and with society itself. If we don't have this kind of plan or this kind of map, then we might be involved in activities that will distract our consciousness from the inner path. So in this sense, religion might be necessary for many people in such a way that it will guarantee that they will be focused in what really matters, in such a way that then their attention could be eventually guided towards within. So religion helps us deal with the world in order to keep the world quiet, tranquil, in such a way that we may then become calm enough to turn our attention inwards and begin the inner exploration and the inner struggle that the esoteric path involves. So religion is a formal protection for the inner path. It's not something that we may easily get rid of. Probably there are a lot of people who don't really need this religious structure, but maybe for many of us it is a requirement, something that we need in order to really be able to hold tightly to the inner quest for truth. Being so that probably a religion might be like the structure that we will organize and will guarantee that our internal quest goes in the right direction. Being so, we might need to ask ourselves, in which way and how can I deal with religion, given the fact that many of us are people who require, as we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, that many of us are people who require this intellectual coherence, these groundings before this rationale, before we follow any path. So I think that one way in which we may approach the sacred texts and the teachings of the great sages from many traditions is through some sort of personal exegesis, some sort of personal hermeneutics in which we may learn to move downward from reason to intellect, understanding that intellect is located in our heart and is related with this immediate capacity to apprehend truth. And different traditions have proposed different methods through which we may, step by step, after understanding rationally and conceptually whatever has been exposed, then we have to reflect on that in such a way that we may contemplate some inner truth behind the words that we have heard or read, and that might connect directly with our own spiritual experience. Lectio Divina is a step-by-step process through which we may read a sacred text, originally the Bible, because of the Catholic confession where it arose. But any text, we may read it in the first step until we think that we have really understood what the history or the story that is being told there is about. After that, we may try to reflect on which aspects of this story might be related with our own personal life at the moment. So we may think that what we have just heard or read is a sort of metaphor that relates symbolically in some way with our own direct living experience. After a while, when we find that connection, then what we had just heard or read becomes very personal and meaningful. And at that moment, we may connect spiritually with God in the sense of trying to find the virtues or whatever we have to develop in order to cope with the situation that we just understood or comprehended. So after finding this connection between these teachings and our own real life, then we have to ask for grace, so to speak, in a way that we would like to ask God in any way that we might understand God as a personal or in an abstract way. We might ask Him to give us the tools, the spiritual and existential tools, in order to go through and the situation that we are dealing with, that we have to cope with, in such a way that we get rid of our own egos, our own personal traits, and we can give the best of ourselves for the sake of the situation. After that, the last stage in this Lectio Divina is just staying very quiet, very calm, with this feeling of union and unity that comes whenever we get very deep in our heart in this sort of dialogue and meeting, I would even say encounter with unity with God. So this kind of methodologies might help us to cope with the external aspect of the religious teachings in a way that then they might turn into something meaningful personally, and we may even discover what really lies behind these apparent teachings. So it's moving from the outer aspect of the teaching to the inner one. This is moving from the exoteric to the esoteric. So I invite you to explore the teachings of different traditions out of this attitude, which is trying to make sense of it in a very personal and inner meaning. The next time that you approach a religious text like the Gospels or the Vishnu Purana or the Upanishads or the Quran, remember that the finite cannot apprehend the infinite. We are called to inhabit the mystery.